video of how we utilize human-centered design to create technology for the workers. So one thing that we asked was, okay, so how does the future of generative AI look like for gig workers? What type of tools exactly do gig workers want to have? There's been a lot of conversations about AI displacing workers, especially generative AI displacing workers. We wanted to step back and think, okay, how do workers imagine this technology? What are they interested in? And so we created interviews and conducted co-design sessions with workers to understand how do they imagine these future tools. And based on that, we created Office Mind AI. So from our interviews, so this is something that you can do in terms of human-centered design. And as I mentioned, you want to involve people and you want to understand what are their needs, what are their wants. And so based on the interviews that we had with workers, gig workers, we identified that they were very interested in having tools that allowed them to better manage their work. They wanted something like a type of coach that would guide them, that would encourage them to succeed. Because right now, gig workers are usually alone without their own bosses. They wanted to have a boss, but they wanted to have a boss that was on their terms. And so they wanted to have their personal boss, their personal manager. And they also wanted to have a secretary who could help them with a series of different tasks. And so based on that, we created a tool that would allow people to be able to have their manager that would help them to create their bio. Because as you know, gig workers, many times they have to brand themselves so that they can get opportunities. So they wanted their personal brander. They also wanted to create cover letters for themselves to get jobs. And they also wanted help in terms of creating their schedule. And now we also had, they also wanted to have a secretary that could help them with summaries, that could help them with grammar checks, that could help them with translations for their different types of jobs. And so we created a generative AI tool that guides gig workers on how they can generate these different contents, and so that they can receive also even coaching from their own personal manager. Notice that you might ask, well, how come they're not just asking ChatGPT for that? Well, a thing is with ChatGPT is that not everyone knows how to use it properly. There's a whole science around prompting. And so what we did was that we created a tool that would actually guide people on how to best use it for their success. So that this way, they don't have to know anything about the prompting, but rather the tool itself guides them into what they want, and then they can have conversations with the tool to iterate over it and improve it. So here, for example, this person is creating a cover letter, and they're iterating with the AI on how they're going to improve it, how it's going to look better. And that's a little bit of an overview about how this tool looks like. And notice that here we combined the formative study, the interviews where we understood people's needs, and then based on that, we generated a tool that could address the needs and wants of people. And so when you're designing with human-centered AI, a key thing is to connect with your population, understand their needs, understand their preferences, and then based on that, create better technologies. And so I hope that this was inspiring. And so, for example, also, if you want to design for women, it's the same thing. It's conducting interviews with the women, understanding their needs, understanding their context, their reality, and then based on that, creating the new technology for them. And so with that, it seems that we have gone through those different concepts, and I'm very proud to be here, and I hope that this mini course was useful about what is human-centered design AI, how can you apply human-centered AI to design tools for workers. And so I'm excited to see all of your creations, and thank you again, Caitlin, for the invitation to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Saiph. So I have all sorts of questions. How is the tool being used, or how would you like to see it being used, and have you been iterating it? since its initial inception?
Yes. So right now, what we're doing is we're running user studies with the tool because we want to have. So I work in the scientific community. And so this means that for me, since I'm interested in generating new knowledge about how we should design these tools for the workers. And so right now we're running user studies to understand, okay, how much does this tool actually help workers? And so we have a control study where workers are using any tools that they want to do these different tasks, for example, creating their biography, creating their schedules, versus our tools. And we want to showcase that with our tool, workers can be much faster and better. And so that's on one hand what we're doing. This is with respect to the generation of scientific knowledge, but we are also connecting with worker collectives. And with the worker collectives, we're having workshops with workers where we present these tools, as well as show them also other AI tools that they can use. So it could be our tools, but any type of tool that they want. And we're giving them access to the tool so that they can appropriate it and use it. I think it is key, as you very well mentioned, that we ensure that these tools get into the hands of the people, in this case, the workers. And so working with collectives has been very helpful for us.
How did you, in the beginning, how did you identify the different groups and the different collectives? And I'm also curious to know, is there the gender dimension? Was there a different kind of need or use case that you came up with because you were dealing with these women gig workers?
Yes. So on one hand, one of my collaborators is Seth Harris. So he used to work with Obama as a subsecretary of labor. And he's very well connected with a number of different worker unions and worker collectives. And so he has been helping us to start to connect with these different worker collectives who are already interested in utilizing our tool. And they're very activist as well. We have also connected with workers directly from our studies, where we're posting tasks, inviting people to test out our tools, and we're paying them to test out our tools. And then these workers are then further connecting us with their worker collectives that they are part of. Now, you also asked a very interesting. So one key thing is to have collaborators, and working with your collaborators for facilitating these types of sharing. And it's also important to realize that many times you can be working with a community, and it might be that it's not necessarily feeding into your research, and that's fine. So that's also why we're giving these courses on, okay, so what is AI? How can you use AI for your different tasks? And this is independent of the research. We want to have a good connection with the community so that we can build together. So that's the second, that's a key thing when you're doing community work, having these types of relationships where you're also taking the time to give back to the community. Now, the second thing is also what Kaylin mentioned of how does it change when you're working with women? So some key things is, for example, for the Latina women, they're very interested as well in community building with each other, with the fellow workers. And so there, for the tools, we are ensuring also that we facilitate those types of personal connections with their peers and also with their different bosses that the women can have. Additionally, within Latin America, we also found that the gig work was one of the first opportunities that women had for creating a professional career. So this gig work seemed to be like a stepping stone for them to start to reach different professional opportunities on their own, where they had to stop to depending on their family. And so this was why this whole bio generator became extremely important, because it was their first time that they were accessing and having the opportunity to brand themselves to be that professional person. And so that's why we had that focus on the personal branding, because for the women, it was like one of their key steps. Now, another thing is a lot of the times as well, we've been working also with a lot of women in rural communities. And there we actually encountered a lot of single mothers Because, for example, in the case of Mexico, what happens is that the women stay, for example, they stay in their rural towns, and the men go off to, for example, they go off to the United States. They go off to live in the cities to make money that they're going to be sending back to their rural communities. And so this means that you have to design in ways in which the women can, for example, be professional and working within these gig platforms while also managing their families, because they completely, the woman becomes the head of the household, and they have to be managing their children, like thinking about all of the logistics of the family while also thinking about their professional life. And so our tool is also designed to help women have that type of coaching, that type of mentorship that they might be lacking, because they are very much left alone to figure it out.
So we read a lot. It's interesting because we think about AI, first we were thinking about it very traditionally in the way of industrialization, where we thought that those jobs were, traditional men's jobs on the assembly line were going to be eradicated because robots were coming. Then we started to understand that generative AI was going to basically help people like these women who hadn't yet done bios, who hadn't yet had their own, I certainly don't have their own version of an NDA to share with people, right? So, and that the people that are probably going to be most impacted are kind of the upper and middle management level. I don't really know where the question's going to be, but so do you see this as being sort of a huge empowering agent for women in terms of wealth creation and in terms of their careers?
I think yes, but it is also important to think about how do we empower all women to be able to access it? Because I think it's going to create divisions between the women who have access to these types of tools and the ones who do not. Because, for example, now you can, one big thing also was for the ones where English was not their main language, this type of tool allowed them to suddenly be able to present themselves in a very professional way. But then what does that mean for the women who don't know about these types of tools? Well, now they are going to be in extreme disadvantage. And so I think it's also important that we do realize that these types of tools can definitely push forward some women, but the ones that are not, that still don't have the digital skills to use these tools, that haven't heard about them, etc., that it's really pushing them behind. And so we also do need to create strategies for reaching all women.
Emma, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question on whether there was ever pushback from like gig platforms, because I mean, connecting these workers could be seen as like helping them to unionize, which I don't know, Uber isn't the biggest fan from, for example.
Yeah, so what we're doing is actually, this is one of the reasons why we're not, it's very complicated, because you can have resistance from these big gig platforms. And so that's why we're not releasing all of our tools completely publicly, because you can then, the gig platforms can then aim to sabotage your efforts, which actually has happened to us. And so it's a little bit complicated because you want these tools to be accessible to all workers, but you also have to be aware that you do have adversaries who are, as you said, they can be against, for example, workers having communication with each other, workers sharing knowledge with each other, which right now the gig platforms are designed in a way in which workers do not have communication with each other. They're not made so that workers can bond with each other and share knowledge. And so I think when you're designing within the space, it is important to realize that a lot of the times these platforms have benefited from workers not communicating with each other and not having access as well to data about their workplace. And so we're trying to balance it. We're trying to balance it out, and it's designing within this. It's learning to design within this environment that is not necessarily always friendly towards workers, which I think that's an advantage that I would argue that you have from academia, or also when you're working within NGOs, that you don't necessarily have to design for example, for profit for a big tech company, but rather you can now focus on the workers, which I think is very exciting.
Yeah. So in closing here, what's your dream for this? What's the impact that you think that it can have? Where would you like to see this go? And what are the next steps?
I would like to see a future where workers can define what type of AI technologies they want to see, and they're able to scaffold together to create it, and they're able to go off and start to utilize the technologies that they want. And it might be that they're using it for collective action, but it might also be, for example, that they're using it for maybe the different professional goals that they have. But I want workers to be empowered to create the AI that they want to see. For example, this tool, we started to co-design it with the workers. So a key thing was that it wasn't us that was defining how the technology should look like, but rather we were letting workers drive it.
Yeah, which I think is a best practice that we're all trying to embrace and normalize and share and proliferate, because I don't think that unless we're creating the technology that we all need, there's no real point in creating the technology just for its own sake, even though pure research, is wonderful. So thank you so much, Saiph. This is like our first open studio. We're so thrilled to have you here. We're so thrilled to have this real, very explicit use case about how technology can be designed in conjunction with communities, in this case with workers. How much better can you be than that? And we're really excited to follow along with you, and I hope also to continue to collaborate. So thank you very much.
Likewise, thank you for the invitation. It was great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.